Hi, you are watching SightsIn Plus, and this is Romesh Srivastava. Please do subscribe the channel for the HR news, for HR updates, and conversation with the top-notch CHROs, thought leaders, and business heads. Today, we are going to discuss Cisco's recent announcement that the company is planning to provide AI agents to each and every employee as a personal assistant. So I think this is a big announcement, and we will try to drive this discussion that how it is going to transform the future of work. Joining us, one of the most respected HR leader and business leader, Mr. Prabir Cha, is CEO of Prabir Cha Advisory, and another renowned face, Mr. Sahil Nayar, a renowned HR thought leader. Welcome, both of you, to SightsIn Plus.
Thank you. Thank you, Ramesh.
Thank you so
So,
much.
Prabir sir, recently we have seen this news that Cisco is planning to provide AI agent to each and every employee, and these AI agents will work as a personal assistant. You can call as a co-worker for the routine work. So, very first, I would like to understand your perspective. How do you drive from this news, and how do
So
you see also the impact on business and the people performance as well?
So obviously there must be logic, there must be sense, and there must be convenience that Cisco has thought. I have not tracked this news item, but I will respond from what I seem to understand. See, the how it will turn out, we don't know. Because when he says that, we'll do it to every employee, it's a very bold, ambitious move, right? Is it doable? Yes, it is. Is it scalable? Yes. Technology enables that. My opening comment will be we should see it in three time horizons. One in the very immediate here and now issue, which means that every employee actually has an EA on call 24/7, which is great because whether you're a senior leader, you're bottom of the pyramid, everyone has 25 things to grapple with. And whether it is in information or decks or your schedule, your calendars and stuff like that, it does take time. And even if it helps you knock off 1 to 2 hours and gives you that productive time, it is great. I think it's a big bonus, and handled right, it can drive productivity. So that's the first thing. But I think I see it more as directional, and therefore the midterm and the long term. My take, Romesh, is that from doing work, a lot of employees across functions, levels, tenure will need to start thinking about the questions to ask AI or an agent, right? And that is going to be a big change because not everyone today also asks the right questions. Not even every senior leader asks the right questions. So we are going to, what we are very casually calling prompt. It will become a very important way. And I think a lot of it will be about the quality of questions and therefore the quality of output, impact, contribution that individuals and the company may make. So that's the second thing that I have. And directionally over a longer term period, I think with all this AI-led transition, if it sustains, if it pans out the way, I think organizations mercifully will become flatter, less hierarchical, and it will be less about therefore what you do, but it's going to be about the quality of your judgment. It's going to be about the agility of responses. And I think more than scale, agility will be the competitive edge. So a lot of what I see in what Cisco may have thought is to actually look ahead, start preparing, start enabling, and hopefully see a very, very different work ecosystem. But the caveat to this is it will depend on what individuals will do in the time that gets released. And that is $1 million question because many of us are busy and have become habituated to appearing busy, doing trivial, meaningless work. So will they actually step up and use this time to do real value adding work? Time alone will say. But on the face of it, I think it's a very, very bold move.
Yeah, absolutely. This is very bold move, and this is a kind of revolution in AI adoption. I would say we are absolutely into the next phase of AI adoption, work with the pilot projects and everything. So we are scaling right now. Sahil, how do you see this picture? What is your first, what the perspective come to your mind when you heard about this news? And what is your opening comment on this?
Right. Romesh, first of all, thank you so much for having me back on this podcast. I think when you have Prabir on the other side, not only do you feel nervous, but you also think that when he's covered everything that you want to say, how do you really value add, right? And I think that is going to be the dilemma that most professionals are going to be facing because everybody comes in with a certain skill set and you think I'm good at this or you think I'm going to make this point, suddenly Prabir covers that point. You got an AI agent that is going to start doing so many things for you that suddenly a lot of people, and I can tell you this with having interacted with a lot of Gen Alpha and Gen Zs when I teach at various colleges, and also mid career professionals and senior professionals, like Prabir was mentioning, there will come a point in time where people will sit back and ask themselves that, yes, there is one angle to being busy, but there is another angle of saying, where do I come in? Where do I value add? Where do I make a difference? Because everything that gave me all the glory all these years suddenly is being taken away and being done more efficiently, more productively, far more faster without appearing busy by an
Mm.
agent. And therefore, when an agent is doing all of that, the question now no longer is, am I giving the right answer? The question is, am I able to decide between the five answers that the agent is giving me, bring in my experience, and then say, I think here is where I'm going to put my money. Here is where my bet is. And when bets go wrong with someone who has 20 years of experience, and bets start going right with someone who has 5 years experience because you're democratizing access to information and knowledge. And the only leverage that I think will continue to remain is experience. Now, all of us, all three of us, and many people who will be listening to this podcast in their experience have seen that people who spent long careers of 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, suddenly that experience becomes zero when you don't show results. What's the point of having so much experience when you can't deliver to a problem statement? And when you have a young kid on the block who has access to technology far better than you and I do and starts delivering results, that is going to be the inflection point, to my mind, where democratization of technology is going to intersect very beautifully with what we call as age-old experience. And that, how human beings, being the most complex creature in the world, are going to react, how insecurities will surface, how temptations to try and put someone down and play dirty politics will surface, how meandering problems will surface. I think that is going to be a complexity that technology won't be able to solve. And I think that is a problem of leadership. And that is something I'm keenly looking forward to in the next couple of years to say, when agents come in and they start doing the bottom of the pyramid work, a little bit of intellectual work as well, how will the multi-generational interplay face off? Because today, when a kid walks in, a 22-year-old walks in and challenges a CXO to say, I don't think this is right, today's CXO doesn't know how to respond because he has four people sitting in front who've been saying, yes, this is a brilliant idea. I love your idea. Let's do this. So that is happening today. But 2 years, 3 years from now, when that intersection happens, I'm very keenly looking forward to see how does that play out. Romesh, back to you.
No, no, absolutely. You have highlighted a very important point that work is going to be transformed completely. And might be the hierarchy also in organization that could also be impacted like this. Professor, what is your comment on this? How do you see the work is going to be transformed with these kind of the initiatives?
So I hope that work will be transformed. See, these are very early days, but when I speak to many leaders, they are saying the right talk, but they're still looking at this entire thing as a project, and it is not yet another era of automation. I don't think that is what we are going to see. It needs a complete rethink about work. Unless you redesign your work, I don't think you will actually leverage the power of the opportunity that is there. So the first thing that I would think is reimagine work. And it's not going to be easy. And Sahil very beautifully said that, people are going to still look at the future with their experience of the past, and that's not going to fly necessarily, right? So for example, work in the past was mindless execution. I tell you, and just be slaving away 10 days, 15 days, 1 month, and that is what was celebrated, rewarded. Bahut mehnat karta hai ladka. Now you don't need that kind of we are no longer in the industrial age that we have uh, you know uh, physical labor is got uh, reduced. I think work will be, or work redesign should be more about judgment. And if you ask me, to me, it sounds or gives me a sense of deja vu, because even in the so-called uh, world that we all lived in, judgment was not something that I particularly thought every leader was doing or getting it right, because there also the past was dictating their judgment for the future. But in the context that we are talking about, I think it will dramatically change. So how will you redesign the work? How will, because AI, etc., will take care of all your repetitive work, documentation, synthesis, even, framing things. The question is, what's the problem you're going to solve? What are the trade-offs you're going to make? How will you rebalance? How will you deal with ambiguity? And if you think AI is going to give you a solution which you will just say yes to, then you have a big problem, because AI is actually going to leverage still a lot of historically available data, whereas you are actually solving problem with the future in mind. So I don't think AI today has the competence to be able to necessarily solve all issues of the problem. So the work redesign, will be very important. Who does what and stuff. The second, I think, it will have an implication on workforce itself, which is scary, which is sometimes exaggerated, but there is no denying the fact that leaders, companies, CHROs will have to be very imaginative. And again, it's not easy, because to think different is not a natural strength of most people. They'll, even today they say, "Aur kisne kiya mere industry mein?" Even today, when I tell a client something, they say, "Hamare industry mein kisne kiya?" So you're still wanting not to be the first mover. You want to be a copycat and say so and so had done. Now you're expecting the same set of leaders to reimagine the workforce. I'm not necessarily talking only about numbers of headcount, which also will reduce. There is no doubt about it. But I think what will change is, and something that Sahil alluded to very brilliantly, it will be a very different workforce. The mix will be very different. And what you will expect of that workforce will also be different. And I'm not saying a younger guy is by default better than the earlier guy, because I've been a student of history, so I don't like periodization. You know, a guy in Jhumri Talaya born in a certain year is by default not the same Gen Z as a guy born in New York, or their economic or social backgrounds. So I think the workforce mix will actually demand greater curiosity, greater learning agility, greater issues around judgment, issues around collaboration. Maybe smaller workforces, but higher need for collaboration, resilience. I think Sahil alluded to that. At the end of the day, it is going to be a very, very different world, right? And it's a world on the go, right? So your agility, your emotional intelligence, resilience. So the workforce mix, the workforce competencies, I think, will get. Again, I'm not saying these are new things, but they will become actually mission critical. And I was sharing this with someone the other day, Ramesh, that what you thought was soft skills actually are going to be the differentiating hard skills, because for everything else, technology and AI will have it. So the good, old issues which people ducked, oh, this is very subjective, oh, ye to HR type issues hain. I think those will become mission critical. And how well will leaders and how well will HR be able to handhold their leaders will be important. So workforce. And the third, uh, I think is about workplace, right? Now we've talked about a hybrid workplace already. Will it stay phygital? Will you become more digital? Very interestingly, it will no longer be only the employee and the manager. Now there is this agent in between, right? So how does the third entity impact the relationship? So it's going to be a very interesting place, and the comfort of people to start treating a digital agent, as a colleague, as an associate. What does it do for the employee? What does it do to the role of managers? Even though a lot of the hierarchy, in my view, will disappear. So in this entire thing about again, Sahil talked about it, that intelligence will be accessible easily. Information is going to be democratized. So how will that new workplace look? For example, I honestly am dismayed when I find companies still saying, oh, we mandate people to come to work to the office. Now, unless your job is actually to make tires or to mix chemicals, or which physically needs you to be in a workplace, I think it's actually the limitation of leadership competence and denial of it to say, I want the person to sit in front of me. And I know of people in firms, consulting firms, law firms, who travel 4 hours a day in a Bombay or a Delhi to do faceless meetings on Teams. I mean, how bizarre is this? And then we talk about ESG. You're burning fuel, you're wasting people's lives. Will Gen Z want to live with it? They will have choices. So I think the entire workplace will and should change. The workforce mix and the disposition and competencies in the workforce will move to stronger, softer skill requirement, which can leverage the stuff that AI will throw, and the work itself. If you do not redesign what you expect of a certain role very, very differently, then you're again doing what we have always made the mistake in the past. We've automated our historical processes, right? I've seen that struggle in my own life, my own teams. No, but we need this. We needed that. You needed that because it was needed at that time. You don't need that thing today. So I think these three interplay will be what I will be keenly watching as the cookie crumbles.
No, absolutely. So this is not the AI that is the pilot project, but yeah, this is absolutely the pilot project when we are talking about the routine work, all the routine work of every employee is being done by the AI agent. So that is absolutely pilot project, and a lot of things will come in this journey, and it will take around 3 to 5 years to get. We will see the impact of this.
No, that
Sahil,
before you go to Sahil, I just want to again remind this. See, I am not saying you will see. The data or evidence will come. How companies will respond, how leaders will respond, I am not necessarily saying everyone is going to accept it the way it is. I don't have that optimism. I don't. And Sahil, I love the way he put it. At the end of the day, the insecurities, they have lived with the territoriality. Do you honestly think they're going to give it away so easily? There'll be a struggle, so-called power struggle between machine and man and characters, etc. So not every company is going to adapt and mold itself as naturally or as intuitively as you and I are thinking on the call. There will be shades of gray and huge shades of gray, unless Sahil has a different view.
yeah, yes, Sahil, what is your point of view?
No, I couldn't agree more with Prabir on this one. And if I keep the three pillars of the work, the workplace, and the workforce intact, and I just dissect each one of them, right? Let's focus on technology. I think I completely agree with Prabir on that one. Technology hallucinates as much as human beings do. Technology has more inherent bias thanks to humans like us who have fed in that bias. Now, come to think of this, you have a manager, you have a team member, and you have each of them armed with their own agent. It's going to be phenomenal because each one's inherent bias is going to be playing out through their agents, let alone their own manifestations of their bias, which will again amplify. Extrapolate this into a boardroom and think of a simulated boardroom where you have agents, where you have CXOs, where you have board members, and you have a mission critical decision to be taken. Trust me, it's not going to be easy. This is dimension number one. Dimension number two actually makes me think that the next decade is going to be the decade of being exposed. And never before have I seen people being exposed as much have they been in the last couple of years with AI taking center stage. I'll give you a classic example. Today, I know I work with someone who has an MDI. I've seen him writing emails for the last 6 years. But in the last 1 year, his emails have just changed. I have seen people who can't communicate, and no offense. Maybe they haven't invested in their vocabulary, they haven't invested in their diction, they haven't invested in the language. But when they comment on an influencer's post, it's a fantastic comment, and you're just sitting back and thinking, is this person really capable of writing this? It's not the person who's capable. It's the prompt in a local language that that person is very proficient in, who is feeding it into AI and saying, give me this in another language, which conveys what I want to convey. And that is the output that you and I are seeing. Now, this output is fantastic when you have the luxury of time. But when you're sitting in a face-to-face conversation in a board meeting, are you going to keep chatting with AI saying, this is what I want to say, now tell me how to say it? And therefore, you will get exposed. And when there's going to be a slip between the cup and the lip, between how you're able to think on your feet and how you leverage technology over a period of time, I think that's going to be the generation of many people getting exposed. Now, no one loves to get exposed, but when you do get exposed, how are you going to manage that exposure? How are you going to cover it up? And to cover it up, what strategies people use and play out? Are they going to really upskill to avoid getting exposed? Are they going to hide behind a godfather or a godmother? Or is it going to play out very differently in the workplace, right? Is going to be something which is going to be very, very interesting to see. And the last piece, I think, which is going to play out to my mind, which I think Prabir also briefly touched upon, is authenticity, right? How authentic are we going to be between what we believe in and what we want to do versus ego playing out in all of this? And I think we've touched upon insecurity, but we haven't touched upon ego. I think a lot of decisions that get taken are taken from a space of ego. Now, if I believe that, Romesh, you are right, because you have actually worked very hard with your agent and you have all the data points, but I don't want to prove that you're right, I'm going to allow my ego to capsize your entire thought process and decision making. Now, this will have two impacts. Impact number one is, if I'm in a position of power, I will continue to dismiss you and find ways to sideline you. And if you're in a position of trying to do good work and make an impact, because you're going to be spending time 24/7 with technology to come up with the best answers, to evaluate, to find one, compare one with the other, apply your own judgment, you're actually going to be switched on 24/7. It doesn't matter whether you're at the airport, you're catching a flight, you've checked into a hotel, you're actually spending time with your family on a weekend, that thought process is going to be on 24/7. And I think something that in our country is still underrated is mental health. And I think because of the fact that you're switched on 24/7, you may think I'm still spending time with family, or I'm here, or I'm talking to someone, or I'm having a relaxed weekend in Mahabaleshwar and it's 19 degrees and the clouds are setting down, but you're only physically there. Mentally, you're still thinking Monday morning, 9 a.m., what do I say that I'm able to win the vote of the board? And if that thought is still bothering you on a Sunday evening in Mahabaleshwar, you're not there 100%. And if you're not there 100%, what is that fatigue going to do to you in the short to long term? And therefore, are you going to burn out? And if you are going to burn out, then is technology going to come back and tell you, hey, you know what? Your body, and we've seen a lot in this in medtech. Yeah, medtech has been evolving significantly with a lot of devices that you can put on various parts of your body to figure out what are the signs that your body is telling you before it actually crumbles, right? So the cookie may crumble in the boardroom, but the fact that your cholesterol is also crumbling and levels are hitting the roof is something that you and I choose to ignore a lot more easily than one feedback that became very personal that actually changes careers. So these are a couple of thoughts that I had in addition to everything that Prabir said, and I agree with. But I think authenticity, the century of being exposed, and more importantly, how tech hallucinates, how it has inherent biases, and how ego will play out in workplace, workforce, and work by itself that gets redesigned for the future is something that is going to be not a dumb cooked biryani, but actually a khichdi that I think we will have to digest before we swallow.
Well, I agree with everything, but just be relaxed. And maybe these are the concerns, these are the curiosities and some insecurities. But if we compare a bit like generally what the businesses are doing, they are keeping the less important work outsourced. Currently, if you see, they are having the outsourced agencies, maybe for the sales, for the HR, for the finance, for everything. They are having this kind of the activity. And this activity would be done by the outsourcing companies and the important the decisions which may impact the more on business, we are having the core team. Isn't the higher version of this? Don't you think so?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I mean, at one level, you're right. It is maybe the next stage of iteration, right? But I think, I liked the way Sahil mentioned, and I love this expression, technology also hallucinates. So whether you outsource, what was the logic? One was cost. One was that it vacates time and you use the time to do actual value adding thing. But let's cross our hearts. Have companies truly leverage the opportunity for all the reasons that Sahil mentioned? And I agree. You see, mediocrity is a curse even with successful companies. Even the so-called big leaders, not all of them are necessarily exceptional, right? I mean, this is the reality of life. We masquerade to appear that we are evolved and we are brilliant, etc. But mediocrity is a curse in most companies. So while I stay with your question, and I think, yes, it's the next stage of iteration. It is an opportunity. Uh, if you'll allow me, I want to pick from what Sahil mentioned. I think he was talking about a lot about the burnout reality, and it's a great insight. We always thought that it is physical exhaustion, which was the problem, right? बहुत काम करते हैं 12 घंटे खदान में काम करते हैं that era is over. But does it mean that burnout and stress has ended? And it sounded very poetic when he said 19 degrees clouds are coming, and but are you really switched off? And it's a question that many of us have to answer, and this is the same risk that cognitive burnout will present even with AI coming, because you're switched on 24/7 and it's an addiction. You will not know how to switch on. He talked about, gadgets all over our body. Good news. Bad news is you're obsessed. That will create its own stress. You're wearing 30 wearables in different parts and where will it end? So I think there are 3 or 4 things I would suggest both to individuals and maybe to corporates. See, corporates talk about their programs of employee assistance, etc. But no one actually thinks about, can I actually do something which will reduce stress? It is not about solving burnout. It is about reducing burnout. It's eliminating burnout. So, for example, one is, can people do more of cognitive pacing? Like athletes do. The top athletes, they run their 100 meters, but then they jog a little easy. So you'll need to start looking at the burst principle, cognitive pacing. You get a lot of work done from your machines, from AI, from whatever tools and techniques you have, but you focus Intense, make your judgment calls, back off. Not easy. Because remember, we have all grown up in a world of busyness, apparent busyness. It's not going to be as easy, but it's important. How do you do cognitive pacing? The other is, I think, individuals and collectively cultures of companies will have to focus on what I call deliberate reflection. Leaders don't reflect. I coach many, many leaders, chairmen and CEOs of companies. And I honestly think everyone is just busy. And with AI available 24/7 and the chance of addiction, you will not switch off, but you should. So while AI will speed things up, will reduce complexity at a level, leaders must learn to deliberate with care. Slowly, think well, think implications, think trade-off, think integrity, right? All of these are very, very material decisions that they should be needing to take. But if they want to do work at the speed of AI, they will make reckless decisions. So apart from the burnout issue, it's also not a great leadership thing. So slow down, deliberate reflection. The third, again, I think Sahil already has alluded, but I call it, how do you set limits and discipline to digital boundaries? And we are all guilty, me included. Every night I go to bed at 9 o'clock, but the last half an hour, 40 minutes, I'm watching YouTube or I'm watching something maybe of my passion area. It could be geopolitics, it could be, but that's the way I'm going to sleep. This is not the way we slept 20 years ago. At least I did not sleep. You actually went to bed, maybe read a page or two, and then you had dozed off. Now you're looking for that machine. Will it be AI tomorrow? Will you say, oh, before I go, something silent said, let me check with my agent. Let me see. So, at the end of the day, people will have to set very strong discipline on digital boundaries. Like this work life, office and home boundaries, it will be now digital because it's available 24/7. I think that's important. And the last, which again linked to what I heard Sahil also say, the psychological safety, which has been beaten to death by every HR guy, by every company, but apply it to AI. Will individuals have psychological safety to challenge what AI might be telling you? Right? And this is a very important dimension of preventing burnout. Otherwise, AI can label people for life. And in the quest of saying it is objective, right? Because most managers and leaders are left-brained species. They will say, there's a data, this is this, the AI has said, and you brand the guy. But because it is based on historical information, the context of labeling could be dangerous. And that can create a lot of anxiety and stress. So 4 things that were coming to my mind, which companies must think through. So it's not just about outsourcing or getting AI in, but dealing with these psychological, emotional, cognitive challenges of potential burnout. I don't know whether that was what you were alluding, but I got inspired by what Sahil was saying, and I think it's a huge issue. And you cannot just have an EAP agency come in and say, now there's a problem, help with it. It's too downstream. You have to tackle it upstream, individually and organizationally.
Absolutely, absolutely. Sahil, we have only a couple of minutes left now. So
Sure.
also I would like to
Sure.
know your comments on how do you see it is going to transform, it is going to, impact on the jobs for the early entry-level positions.
Yeah. I think, Ramesh, 2 or 3 quick points, right? I think Prabir mentioned 4. I'll try and stick with 1 just for the road, right? Every revolution that we've seen in our life, yeah, whether it's the Industrial Revolution or revolutions that happened way after that, every revolution changed the way we work, right? But I think the AI revolution is changing the way we think we work. And I think that is the key differentiator to my mind. And this is a classic case in point, right? If you work with any kind of agent, whether it's ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, whichever that may be your favorite, over a period of time, the AI will understand you. Try this out. Act like a devil's advocate. You ask for something, say, I don't agree with you, give me an alternate point of view. act like a strategist, act like a compliance person, act like a risk averse person. I think the fundamentals remain the same. And every output will only be the first layer of solving for issues. Eventually, it has to be and will be human intelligence that will allow for you to do exact fit for culture, fit for purpose, fit for organization. Like Prabir was mentioning, he may have wealth of experience of coaching, but he's not going to give the same coaching. The methodology may be the same, but his interaction with every CXO is going to be different. And that is simply because the audience is different. And I just want to wrap up with that a Pythagoras theorem will remain a Pythagoras theorem, but the application of that Pythagoras theorem in your context and asking the fundamental question, is it even relevant? I think that is where the conversation begins. Just because I have ammunition with me doesn't mean I need to fire.
Correct.
I think, Romesh, now to answer your question about entry-level roles, right? I think a lot has been said about this. Many people have the view that AI will take away entry-level roles, but I have a slightly different hypothesis. What I'm seeing around me is that AI is redefining and not actually taking away entry-level roles, especially for those people who are skilled. And I think that is the clear differentiation. Come to think of it, as all of us grew up, these were called the grunt jobs, right? We had to sit, we had to file papers, we had to do some data entry. But if you come to think of it, that was actually the way most of us learned. Our foundation was built because we spent a lot of time doing the grunt work. And therefore, the question that we need to answer is, if we take this grunt work away and get AI to do all of it, how are we going to learn? How are we going to learn? And that is going to make all the difference. All right? That is exactly going to make all the difference.
If try to conclude, so definitely it's a revolution. It's a next kind of revolution after the internet. So this is at the very early stage. This is the one company which has announced. Might be we can see a lot of companies are coming with a similar kind of announcements. There would be challenges. There would be a need for the some different skills that will also AI first kind of a culture in organizations. So let us watch and see how it is going on the journey. Thank you so much, Professor and Mr. Sahil, for joining us and sharing your wonderful thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us over. Thanks, Prabir. Lovely to be with
Thank you
you
so
together.
much. Lovely hearing your views. Thanks, Ramesh.
Thank you, Ramesh.